Hello there, and welcome to the Pint-Sized Healing Podcast. My name is Max Thompson. Let's get started. So, in this last Pint-Sized Healing Podcast around boundaries, I just want to talk to you about how important personal boundaries are to our health and happiness. And to get started on that, I wanted to read something that Carrie found on the Art of Charm, and she sent it to me. Carrie is my right-hand woman at SwanWaters, and she shared this with me, which we both found quite interesting. In fact, the contagiousness of toxicity is a natural defense mechanism. Howard Bloom, in the Lucifer Principle, explains how increased toxicity of certain bacteria was one of the first evolutionary adaptations. Bacteria actually evolved to get more and more toxic in order to survive. The same applies to humans on the macro level. Now, this is the thing, one of and I think we see this a lot and I for sure have seen it in my toxic family, where in order to survive the toxicity that we grew up in, and we start developing toxic behaviors of our own in order to deal with the toxic environment that we are living in at that particular point, right? And this is I think this does go into boundaries as well, because we grow up or we live, we grow up or we're in a relationship of whatever type where boundaries are not respected, are not accepted, and so we develop quite toxic ways of trying to deal with that, because boundaries are so essential in defining who we are. Like I said a couple of weeks ago, boundaries are what determines our shape and the shape of our world. That's how we get to decide who we are in the world that we live in, and that's that system being constantly under attack. So it's that a defense mechanism will kick in, and a lot of times that defense mechanism is developing really toxic ways of trying to defend our boundaries. And so we become quite, I wouldn't necessarily say aggressive, but we maybe become quite sneaky about implementing boundaries. Like, for example, at one point my sisters had decided they were going to give my mother a weekend away with her daughters for her retirement. And even as it was suggested, I said that I didn't want to give that as a gift, and I didn't want to come with them on this weekend. I didn't like the idea of it, didn't want to go, didn't want to gift it. All those, all my boundary attempts were, of course, ignored, and so my mother was gifted a weekend away with her daughters. And even even after it was gifted, every attempt I made at saying that I did not want to go and participate in this activity was ignored, and so I was expected to come. And so in the end, I decided I was just going to pretend to be ill on the day, just as an excuse, right? Now, I don't like making excuses, and I definitely don't like not being truthful. But the thing is, I went unheard for weeks while they were planning this weekend, even before it was gifted, before, I was there at the moment that it was suggested, and I immediately said no, and it wasn't heard, and it wasn't heard in the weeks leading up to the eventual trip. And so the only avenue left to me, I felt, was to just pretend to be ill. And because I didn't feel like that would be easy either, that would still be a boundary that would be challenged. And so the night before, I had a couple of drinks, well, more than a couple, so that I would actually be in a physically should we say, physically impaired state the next morning. Anyway, I was hungover the next morning. And so I could get away with the excuse of I'm not feeling well. Um, but it's crazy to think, and especially now that I'm not in that toxic situation anymore, it's almost mind-boggling that I would go through that length to get out of a family weekend. But the thing is, when we are in a toxic environment, and a large part of that toxicity is aimed at trying to erode our personal boundaries, then we become toxic in our own sense in how we try and deal with that. Does that make us bad people? No, it just it's a survival mechanism, right? It's You're trying to protect yourself, and you're trying to do it in ways that work within that toxic environment. And unfortunately, toxicity often requires toxicity on our end as well in order for us to survive. Listen, those kind of moments, and oh my, I could talk for hours with examples of things like this. Um, those are not moments that I'm particularly proud of, but they were part of me trying to survive in a situation that was super super difficult to survive. So I try not to beat myself up over that too much. And I think one of the ways that I do that is by now practicing and learning better ways to deal with situations. And one of the things that I'm trying to do that is to be better and more positive about the ways in which I communicate my personal boundaries to the people around me. And what helps is that the people around me are now happy and healthy people, and people who are as committed as I am to being more positive about our personal boundaries. So, that makes it a lot easier. My boundaries aren't constantly under attack, and so therefore, I don't have to protect them um, in a in the same kind of warlike way. Do you know what I mean? I'm not constantly on guard for my boundaries, against the people that are around me, because they're not constantly looking for ways to trample on said boundaries. So if you too are wanting to learn some more about boundaries, obviously we've spoken about this the whole month. We have launched the first module of our SwanWaters Healing Academy this month over on the website, which is all about boundaries, and it is absolutely jam-packed with practical advice, with even some hacks on helping you set boundaries in a in a not so toxic way, even if you're in a toxic situation. So please do go to swanwaters.com and check that out. And I will see you next week and next month. Until then, bye.